25 to 12. So the Australian government via the eSafety Commissioner is pioneering a new set of rules for the internet giants. They might be forced to remove harmful online abuse against Australians within 24 hours if this scheme gets up. It's called the Takedown Scheme. It's going to receive millions of dollars of funding, announced this morning. Paul Litherland is a former police officer who these days runs an organisation called Surf Online Safe, which speaks for itself. Paul, good morning.
Gareth, how are you, mate?
Good to talk to you again.
Good, mate.
Hey, what do you make of this?
The eSafety Commission, they do some tremendous work, and over the last 5 years, they've been continuing to evolve that sort of level of assistance for Australian members of the public and all that sort of stuff through social networking. So I think it's going to continue to evolve, and they are making some pretty breakthrough sort of pushing to get these sort of changes happening. But it's just a matter of how far it can go and the response from the networks. It's what I'm looking at the moment.
Yeah. If past form holds, they'll probably jump up and down and complain and scream and say that it's not viable and that it'll ruin their businesses and it'll ruin the experience for their users. Yeah,
and the main problem we have in a lot of situations is, they do respond quite well. We're talking about the big ones, Instagram, Facebook. They do actually respond quite well to the eSafety Commission's requests, but in reality, though, they're only civil requests. There's no real, I suppose, power behind legislative requirements. So they are responding well, and this is, again, where I think the eSafety do really well. But the problem we have, Gareth, is average Joe Blow doesn't have that ability. Facebook, under this legislation, are required to have a person liaise with the Commission. So that's a conduit that average Joe doesn't have. So they work very well at removing content on report, but you or I, if you wanted to report a post where someone was having a go at you or being quite abusive, then you've got to go through this horrible reporting network on Facebook or Instagram to get content removed. So we need to have the networks taking a little bit more responsibility in taking that action for everyone, not just people who might cause them a bit of grief.
The elephant in the room here, Paul, is that this is still, I think it's a good idea, right? But it's still reactive, isn't it? The harm has to be done in the first place before you get the mandatory takedown notice. The comment has to be published. It has to be out there. It has to be seen by people. It has to victimise the person who's on the receiving end of it, all before it's then taken down. Wouldn't it be better? Wouldn't it be better if somehow these social media services got themselves to a place where they could actually make their users accountable by design, the way they design their systems to prevent abuse from happening in the first place?
And this is where myself and other professionals around the world and Australia and even the Commission are working really well at that ethical design, mate, where they're starting to take some actual responsibility. But there's two main catalysts for that, Gareth, which I'm continuing to deal with, not only now as an educator but as a former copper working at tech crime. Number one is the internet's borderless.
Yep.
Okay, so we need legislation that accommodates that. So if I send a subpoena as a police officer to Facebook from little old Western Australia, then that subpoena should have exactly the same power and authority as if it was coming from an American police officer.
Yep.
So I should be able to enforce legislation in my country because that platform is in my country. Does that make sense, mate?
Absolutely.
But I don't have that at the moment. But number two is the biggest one is volume. Okay, based on current stats, Facebook have one moderator per 104,000 users on the network. So for me, that needs to change. But and artificial intelligence is great and machine learning is awesome, but it's never going to be as good as humans looking at content and going, that's inappropriate. And that's the biggest issue. And I say some pretty naive things in regards to my presentations, and they're always tongue-in-cheek. But wouldn't it be great if we had a global legislation that went, right, if you've got, for every 10,000 users, you need to have 100 people moderating. Facebook couldn't do that because 2.6 billion people logging in a day.
Yeah.
How could you do that? So this is where these things need to change. The creation of these playgrounds need more moderation.
But, I mean, this is the point. There's actually nothing really stopping them from doing that. They are one of the most profitable companies that have ever existed. It would just cost them time and money. They just don't take responsibility for it.
No, and in reality, because they're pushing back to the onus of users, because we tick a box that says, yes, I agree to this and that. And the main thing that probably will change is the fact that, okay, if you want to use our service, then you'll have to pay for it. So people will be paying for Instagram, TikTok, and all that. And I don't think people will want to do that. And that's the biggest concern. And we are having some great changes. I mean, there's been responses where in the UK they've got some great legislation coming in. In Germany they've got some great legislation coming in. And as a result of that, Facebook in those areas, Gareth, are starting to hire more people. So they're responding in that environment. And hopefully that will be the same here in Australia. But at the moment, what I'm trying to change is these playgrounds are being created and there's no real level of legislation that's governing that. I mean, I built a gazebo in my front yard the other day, and the amount of things I've got to jump through with council to get it up is pretty strong, but the online world isn't doing that, and we need to change that, and hopefully little chipping away with legislation such as this and the reform that the eSafety are coming through will start to put pressure on these networks, and that's what we're trying to change. Yeah.
Paul, it's an interesting discussion. We'll see where it goes next. Appreciate your expertise as always.
Good on you, mate. Take care.
Paul Litherland from Surf Online Safe, 922 11882. I expect that the social media giants will complain about this scheme. They tend to complain when governments try and get them to do anything that's in the public interest rather than their own narrow corporate interests. That tends to be the pattern.